I loved so many books in 2023 that I had to split my best books of the year video into two parts. Part one is already on my channel with all of the books that I loved that were specifically released in the past year. And that leaves us with these. Now, these books were not published in 2023, but I read them for the first time in the last year. So this is a mix of books that I discovered this year, books that I finally got around to reading this year. You know, there are some classics in here too. And I'm making this video so that these will now be on your radar for 2024 because I feel like you need these in your life. Like, your life will improve as a result of these books. And I'm going to start off with what is my Roman Empire. A book I think about constantly, a book I have thought about every single day since finishing reading it, and I think the book that is my new favourite book of all time. This is Sula by Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison was the ITGIRL. Dare I say, the greatest to ever do it. Like, I don't think that anyone ever understood, except maybe James Baldwin. I think Toni Morrison and James Baldwin just understood the human condition like no one else. They write about a range of characters so excellently and so perceptively. Every single character feels like a real person that you miss when you turn the final page. And I first read this in like a frenzy. I read it on a bullet train from Hiroshima to Tokyo. Opened the first page as I sat down on the train, and then I didn't even look out the window a single time because my head was just like in this book. And as we pulled into Tokyo Station, I turned the final page, and I don't mean to be dramatic, but I think this changed my life. Because if I could write like this, I would just be elated. Basically, the setting that is created at the beginning of the novel, it's called The Bottom, and this area so vividly, with such detail, that it feels like you are genuinely stepping off the pages into a real place. Each character is fully fleshed out and given the attention and the affection that they deserve, and also the empathy that they deserve. And I just felt like this was a masterclass in writing a range of characters, in writing about the concept of betrayal. So basically we follow these two girls who grow up to become women and then essentially become worse than enemies because of something that is just frankly unforgivable. And this had me in the palm of its hand. It's a book that is just overflowing with brilliance and astute observations about what it is to be human. And also, if that doesn't convince you, multiple characters are set on fire in this book. And if that doesn't make you want to read it, I don't know what will. So that is Sula by Toni Morrison. Trust me, read it, thank me later. The next book is by Olivia Blake, and this is Alone with You in the Ether. First and foremost, cracking title. Like, that is a gorgeous, gorgeous title. Alone with You in the Ether. If I see a book with a title like this, best believe I'm taking it home with me. I'm gonna pay for it, but it will be coming home with me. This is a love story about two misfits who find each other and at times lose each other. The writing is elevated and elaborate and just so rich with symbolism and metaphors and similes and imagery. It's compelling and addictive and impossible to put down. You are rooting for both of them but recognize their flaws. And again, I feel like writing with empathy is so important. I love when authors present characters who are flawed, who make mistakes, but they help us to understand why those people make mistakes. And I think that's one of the most powerful things about fiction, is that the takeaway in our real lives is that we start to understand why people do make mistakes, why people do behave in the ways that they do, and it means that we are more forgiving as a result. The book is about desire and mortality and whether love is enough. It's a puzzle that you put together, but there are some absolutely stunning lines. It's so lyrically written. Basically, this guy and a girl have this kind of meet-cute moment in an art institute, and they decide that they will limit themselves to having just 6 conversations. And over the course of those conversations, these two damaged, destructive people fall for each other. And it is just electric when these two powerhouses come together and sparks really, really fly. If you're gonna read one love story this year, make it this one, please. Okay, this next book broke my heart into tiny little pieces. Like, if you ran me over, I think it would hurt less than this book did. This is Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan. It's split into 2 parts. In the first part, we follow this group of guys when they go on a trip to Manchester. And it's all about boyhood and adolescence and friendship and masculinity. It's about a friendship based on music and films and art and culture and just a zest for life and this kind of mid-80s spirit of rebellion. And again, listen, I'm all about character. The way that these characters are described is just so vivid and vibrant and colourful. They bounce off the page into the room that you're sitting in, and then Part 2 strikes, and one of the men has news for the other, and it becomes this really wise and poetic meditation and lamentation on grief and mortality, and it just feels like a gorgeous tribute to the people who shape us and the enduring power of friendship even when people are no longer recognizable to us once circumstances change. And so that is Mayflies. Okay, we're sticking with the themes of books that are incredibly sad. This is very hard to show you because the cover is so reflective. There we go, that should do it. This is Another Brooklyn, and it's by Jacqueline. The way I describe this is that it's a more palatable version of A Little Life. We follow a group of 4 friends as they grow up and come of age again in New York City. This time it's actually about female friendship, and I think it's a beautiful addition to the tradition of studying female friendship in literature. Thinking about kinship, about memory, about death, about tragedy, about the ways that we shape each other's lives. The book is also about what it means to be Black in America. It's written incredibly poetically with a real rhythm and energy, and it feels like a real love letter to Brooklyn and to childhood and to youth and to the people you meet along the way, and it's just very, very sad. I feel like I can't tell you too much without giving things away. You just have to experience this for yourself. But at just 170 pages, it's a bit less of a commitment than A Little Life, and there's way less graphically described trauma. So if you're looking for a kind of middleman and A Little Life has intrigued you, or you really enjoyed A Little Life, then I would really recommend this book, Another Brooklyn. Staying with the theme of being sad in New York City, this book is called By Grand Central Station, I Sat Down and Wept. Again, of course, there are always themes because this is my personal taste and preference in literature, but again, take a shot every time I say this book has lyrical writing. If you're playing along with that drinking game, I'm sorry, you're probably hammered at this point and you have no idea what I'm saying anymore. I probably have like 6 heads. But this is a book by Elizabeth Smart, and she is smart by name and smart by nature. The writing in this is absolutely mesmerizing and enthralling and spellbinding. It's about a woman who falls in love with this Japanese poet, and she invites him to New York to stay with her. She has this super impassioned relationship with him, and then he leaves. And this book details all of the really intense emotions that that very specific scenario would inevitably invoke. This to me is a masterpiece, and as someone who loves the craft of writing, I just ate it up, and it's something I return to a lot for inspiration, just in terms of pushing the envelope with what you can do with the written word, how elaborate you can be, how ornate your writing and how embellished your writing can actually be. It's a book that you have to tread through slowly because you have to really take in each and every line because they're so meticulously crafted, but it is so tender and heartbreaking and really vulnerable too, to basically confess all of these emotions. So that is By Grand Central Station, I Sat Down and Wept, and basically wherever you sit down and read this book, you will weep. Let that be your warning. These pages might get wet from your tears. Speaking of which, wow, real common theme that these are all pretty sad. This book is called Armond. It's by Won Pyong Son and translated by Sandy Jusun Lee. This is translated from Korean, and it's a real modern Korean cult classic. We basically follow this little boy who has a brain condition. So there's a part of your brain which is the size of an almond, which enables you to feel emotions like anger and fear, and this little boy's part of his brain is underdeveloped, and so he basically really relies on his mum and his grandmother to teach him about these emotions. And then tragedy strikes, and there's a letter immediately after the tragedy which made me burst into tears on a very packed flight. I was very grateful that I was still wearing a COVID mask at the time because it was literally soaking up the tears that were pouring down my cheeks, and if that doesn't sell you a book, I don't know what will. It's an exploration of what it means to feel, what it means to interact with other people. It's about isolation, being misunderstood, failing to understand others as well, and also a surprising bond that this boy ends up forming with someone who feels very extreme, intense emotions. It is phenomenal and deeply, profoundly moving, but there's also a lot of wit and humour along the way, and I think it has all of the ingredients to make for a really, really special book, and that is what Armond is. Before I talk about the next book, I just wanted to let you know that today's video is very kindly brought to you by Squarespace. And Squarespace is the all-in-one platform for building a website or an online brand with hundreds of incredible templates, which you can use as a starting point and as a launch pad for building your dream website. So you can let your creativity run wild, you don't need to do any coding, or you don't need to be an expert web developer. developer, Squarespace has built-in functions like the ability to create an email sign-up list, to create a blog. There are also wonderful analytical tools so you can see what your audience are really enjoying and therefore what you should be making more of. And the good news just keeps coming because Squarespace also has a free trial so you can check it out completely for free, have a little play around, and then when you're ready to launch your beautiful new website, you can use the code jackedwards at squarespace.com/jackedwards to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So, all of these books are fiction, but I think this is kind of problematic to categorize in that way because I think you would describe it more as literary non-fiction or like literary memoir. This is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This does require a lot of trigger warnings because it is about emotional and physical abuse, but written in a really unique and innovative and creative way. Each individual chapter is very short and punchy, some are just a few lines, but it details all the different ways that abuse can manifest itself in a way that chills you to the bone and is spine tingling, but also absolutely beautiful. It feels like this author just laid her soul bare over the course of 278 pages, and we are so lucky to get to be able to consume this. The way that she articulates herself is breathtaking and sublime. It talks about how some people treat love as a game that they can win, and our narrator has found herself in a totally precarious and terrifying situation that she has to rebuild from and kind of find herself again. It's also about queer relationships and queer dynamics, and it is just gut-wrenching. All of these books actually are very, very sad. What does that say about me? I don't know. Moving on, before we get introspective, this is a book called There. It's by Tommy Orange, and I think it's really important each year to identify the gaps in your own knowledge and your own reading. And for me, one of the things I was missing was that I'd never read a book about Native American voices and featuring a full cast of Native American characters, and that is exactly what this book does. We follow 12 individual characters from the Native community, and each one of them is somehow connected to this powwow in Oakland. Over the course of the novel, we realise that almost all of the characters are linked in some way. Some are tenuous links, some are blood relatives, some are really deeply associated with one another and intertwined. And while we do get invested in each individual story, the way that they all come together at the end, because, you know, we're leading up to this one event, and so over the course of the novel, there's this real sense of tension because we know all of these people are going to arrive at the same place at the same time eventually. And when they do, it is explosive. It's just incredible. It's unlike anything I've ever read before. And the title gets its name from a quote by Gertrude Stein, which is actually often misinterpreted. So she was describing the feeling of coming home to your native community and realizing that it has changed and maybe there's no longer a space for you there. She says there is no there. There is nothing to grasp onto, there's nothing that you can cling onto anymore. But the way this has often been misinterpreted is by people who seek to gentrify areas or colonize areas, specifically areas that are inhabited by Native American people or indigenous people in general. And so they say there's no there. There's nothing happening there. And therefore it is our right to overtake it and overpower it and overcome it. And I think it's really interesting the way that people have misinterpreted this one quote to mean essentially the exact opposite of what it actually means. And that is where this book gets its title. It is all about interpretation, how different people perceive the same events or different events, and how different members of the same community navigate the world. It's propulsive and tragic and a really important American story that maybe you haven't come across before. So I would really, really highly recommend There by Tommy Orange, and I cannot wait to read his next book. Next, returning to an old favourite, this is the next book by Douglas Stewart. This is Young Mongo. As you know, I adored his first book, Shuggy Bane, and dare I say, I think this one is even better. We follow a young boy called Mongo whose mother is an alcoholic, and so he is sent away on a kind of camping trip with these two older guys from his community, and they turn out to be wrong-uns. No, they're terrible people. But at the same time, he is experiencing first love, and there are these gorgeous, tender scenes where he and this boy James are experiencing yearning and lust and longing and intimate moments when they feel they can get away with them and when they can snatch them. And so the book is really tough. It kind of hurts your heart, but also expands your soul. And it is delightful at times and shattering at others. So I devoured this book. Also in my previous video, my favorites from this year, I spoke about the book Demon Copperhead. And one of the things I loved about that book is the way that the author really gets into the mind of that character. Every simile, every metaphor, every analogy, every bit of imagery feels like it is plucked from the character's head directly. And that's exactly the same with Mongo. Like, we are totally in his worldview. Of course, at times there is the irony of what we know as adults that he doesn't know as a naive child, but ultimately we just end up with so much empathy for this young boy. We feel like we really, really know him. We miss him when we finish reading the book, and this absolutely wrecked me. Okay, 2 more books to go. This book is an absolute classic. This was actually recommended to me by AI. What? I made a video right at the beginning of this year where I used ChatGPT to recommend me books, and one of the books it recommended was this one, The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. And this is a book I'd never considered picking up before, and I did, basically just because I was filming a video about it, and oh my god, it has become one of my new favourite short stories that I've ever read. We follow a man who has lived his life incredibly frivolously. It's about a man who has lived a pretty frivolous, crazy life, and then he finds out that he is dying, and he is confronted with the inevitability of mortality. You know, he realizes he's not a god. He's not going to live forever, and actually his demise is going to come much sooner than he anticipated, and so he doesn't have long left. And that causes a complete shift in his worldview, and it's a really tragic but powerful and important narrative about grief and death and dying, because the character is ultimately grieving himself and starting to consider in real time the ways that he chose to live his life and whether he would stick by those decisions if he were to be given a second chance. It's about being taken before your time, and I think it's really essential reading. It's also very short too, so it's, you know, I think you should add this to your 2024 reading list. And finally, another small but mighty book. This is Small Things Like These. I spoke about Claire Keegan in my previous video as well. She has been more consistent in my life than some people I know in the last year. I was so grateful to discover her writing because I think she is brilliant and her writing is so lyrical and sublime. This particular story is about a little town in Ireland as it's preparing for Christmas. And we have this character called Bob Furlong who's preparing for the festive period, wrapping up for Christmas, and then he uncovers a really dark piece of Irish history. Without giving too much away, this is about the brutal treatment, the terrible treatment of fallen women by the Catholic Church, and the astonishing way that women who were perceived to be corrupted have been treated in Ireland, and of course around the world too, but this is specifically about this horrible moment in Irish history. The book affected me so deeply. It's a book I have not stopped recommending ever since I read it, and actually the best news is it's being turned into a movie with Cillian Murphy playing Bob Furlong, which I think is going to be incredible. That's one to look out for in 2024, and if you want to be able to say, I read the book first before the movie, now's your opportunity. This is your golden ticket. I'm going to be following her career very closely. I can't wait to see what else she writes. And I loved it. And it's a great book to read in the winter time too, because like I said, it is kind of all about Christmas. I read this right at the beginning of the year, and it is still standing strong as one of the best books that I read in 2023. So, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Let me know what your favourite book of 2023 is, what book you think I should be reading in 2024. Don't forget you can follow me on Instagram, on TikTok, on Goodreads, on the Story Graph to keep up with my reviews as the year goes on. And of course, I'll be uploading to this channel and my second channel all throughout the year as we embark on another year of reading. So thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you very, very soon. All the best, stay in touch, have a wonderful day, and I can't wait to see you in 2024. Bye-bye!